Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talking Logistics, where we have conversations with thought leaders and newsmakers in the supply chain logistics industry. It's my great pleasure to welcome today's program Karen Sage, who's Chief Marketing Officer at MercuryGate. And today we're going to talk about using business intelligence to navigate supply chains. Now, supply chain logistics professionals face, a myriad of challenges in the industry, including the fact that, many of them are drowning, in data. And this is particularly true for transportation professionals, right? As they're working across multiple modes, across multiple geographies, and data is really coming from many different systems, not only internal systems, but a lot of external systems, including, now mobile devices and GPS devices. So, the big challenge is, how do you convert all of this data into actionable intelligence? And, what are some of the challenges or the hurdles to do that? And then ultimately, how do you convert or translate business intelligence into business value? So those are some of the questions we're going to explore here with Karen. And Karen's obviously got a great pulse on what's happening from a transportation standpoint there at MercuryGate, and certainly has some great insights into BI in the TMS realm. So Karen, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, Adrian. I'm really excited to be here.
Great, Karen. Before we kind of dive into the topic, we've had many of your colleagues at MercuryGate on Talking Logistics before, but this is your first time, and like I do with, anytime I bring a new guest onto the program, I always like to find out a little bit about, how and why they got involved with supply chain logistics to begin with, right? And so why don't you briefly tell us a little bit about your career path, how and why you got involved with this industry, and kind of what your current role and responsibilities are there at MercuryGate.
Sure. So, I feel like the start of my career path actually led me to this ultimate challenge of supply chain in a very circuitous way. I started my career as an engineer doing operations research technology, looking at optimization and things like queuing theory. For instance, I did research on things like route planning and traffic holding patterns. And you might ask, for transportation? Actually not, for computer networks. So, but if you think about it, substitute physical packages for packages of data or information, and inventory storage for chip buffers, there's a lot of similarities. Now, that said, I think transportation is actually harder of the two. But believe it or not, there are a lot of synergies. So that was really the start of my career. Since then, I've made two transitions, one from engineering to marketing, and the second from computer networks to transportation. I feel at home in this space. It's really fast moving. I'm fascinated with the digitization that's going on in the logistics area. And that's what really leads me to where I am today, which is the Chief Marketing Officer at MercuryGate. I've been here almost a year. I run marketing and demand generation. Not only is logistics right up my alley, but being able to market a product that's the best of the industry is also icing on the cake. So I'm really excited to be here to talk about this. So thank you for the invite.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, I'm an engineer by background myself. And I think, if I had to say, what's the common thread of many of our guests here on Talking Logistics is a lot of folks in the supply chain logistics industry got their start in engineering. So I think it's a good foundation, for, to be successful in this industry, right? So
I agree.
A lot, we talk about, the topic at hand, right? Data, optimization, business, and analytics. That's all foundational to engineering. And obviously supply chain as well. So let's go right into the topic now. Like I said in my opening remarks, there's a lot of discussion these days, especially in transportation about, the importance of converting data into actionable intelligence. Why is that? Why is this so important today? Why are so many people talking about it?
The reason actionable intelligence is discussed of late and why it's so important is really the incredible impact it can have on all aspects of your business. The type of analyses that you can do today were really challenging, if not impossible, before the advancement of BI tools. So, today you can ask and really get fast answers to very complicated questions. Some example questions would be like, what is the average transportation cost for shipping widget X via LTL for year to date? Questions that really are slices and dices of what were typically common things that you wouldn't be able to ask without a lot of data crunching.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. I think that I see and hear the same thing from supply chain logistics professionals as well. And I think the other factor is, time compression, right? So they're forced to have to make these smarter decisions, right, faster. And kind of the old ways of kind of analyzing data, with spreadsheets or things like that, was kind of it has been a hindrance in terms now, because now they don't have the luxury of time. In many ways, they have to make decisions in minutes or hours as opposed to days, right?
That's right. That's right. The faster, the better, and the more actionable the data and provided it to you in ways that you can, respond to quicker, the more effective it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I find, overall is that that there's the margin for error, right, or the margin for latency in terms of being able to kind of take data, be able to analyze it, and then be able to take some action is shrinking. And I think this is true for across all industries. I mean, you see it very acutely in the retail industry and what's happening there. But I talk to companies, 3PLs. I talk to companies in the chemical industry, and that seems to be kind of a common thread.
Definitely.
Now, but at the same time, right, converting data into actionable intelligence, it's kind of easy for us to talk about it and just say, oh, well, yeah, let's just do it, right? But it's really, not that easy. I mean, what are the main challenges that you see, that companies face, shippers or logistics service providers, and actually converting data into actionable intelligence?
So let's talk about shippers first. Eric Johnson, I don't know if you saw, he just did a great survey, and it came out with 5% of shippers believe that they have extremely accurate data. Probably even more surprising, 20% of the shippers said that they had no idea how accurate their data is. I was really surprised. He did a survey a little while ago that said 35% of shippers don't even have transportation management systems, whether through owning a TMS or leveraging a 3PL. So, I would say the first challenge really being faced is getting measurement and instrumentation in place. You heard the whole adage, garbage in, garbage out. I think that's truly, relevant here. And you need to invest in technologies such as TMS that help record and aggregate the data so that you can effectively track and manage the data. Once you have those systems running and recording the data, I think that's really where the magic can happen. Until you have that fundamental technology, it's, I think it's not so easy. I think, and that's for shippers. For logistics service providers, I think they're much more apt to have technology such as TMS. And, the challenge they face is how to extend that data to the shipper, both in terms of ways that they can provide it in context, in ways that the shipper can leverage, and do it in ways that really can add them sort of above and beyond insight into what's going on.
The great points. I mean, the data quality management, the data quality problem, has been something that I've been on a soapbox, for over 18 years since I've been kind of an industry analyst. And it really is a problem that, it continues to be a challenge for many companies. Part of it is because I think you rightly pointed it out, a lot of companies don't even have the systems in place to even start, aggregating that data, to even just start analyzing whether it's good or not. I think secondly, a lot of that data comes from, third parties, right? External to the companies, whether it's the carriers or suppliers or 3PLs. So they don't fully control the quality of the data, at least at the origin point. So I think that brings to the third point, which I think is a lot of companies lack the processes in place as well to manage data quality management, right? Because they say, well, that's not my problem. IT says, well, that's logistics problems, and logistics says, well, that's IT's problem. Or that's my supply. Just get the suppliers to send us good data, and we wouldn't have a problem. So on and so forth. And I think you still see a lot of that, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that relationship, somehow you have to get IT, they're in the background and sort of doing the integrations and the support, but they have to get out of that process, because if you're waiting between the time you have the data and for them to sort of analyze it in the background and give it back to you, it's too late. The data is no longer useful.
Right. And the point you brought up about, 3PLs or logistics service providers, I see that as well. I mean, in fact, I've written over the past few years that, a lot of shippers are looking to their 3PLs as a source of technology, right? So not only, help us move product from point A to point B, or not only help us with the distribution aspects, but they're really looking at LSPs as being a source of technology and a source of that data and information, so that they can bring that data and information into their own system, so that they can have a broader view of what's happening across the supply chain. So in many ways, 3PLs, I always said, they're almost like an outsourced IT provider, an outsourced provider of business intelligence data that a lot of shippers are looking for.
Very much so. Very much so.
So, kind of shifting gears a little bit, business intelligence analytics have become, an important component of transportation management systems. Certainly I've been looking at this market now for over 18 years, and over the past few years, I've seen kind of that capability moving up the priority list for a lot of shippers and 3PLs as well. I mean, how have the BI analytics capabilities of TMS evolved over the past few years, and kind of what are some of the key features or attributes that companies are looking for? Those companies that you talk to.
So it's funny, as a marketer, we always like to kind of get all excited and announce things as brand new, but business intelligence isn't really totally new to TMS. At its core, business intelligence simply is a set of technology and tools for the transformation of raw data into meaningful and useful data and information, right? And doing so for business analysis purposes. So, if you think about business intelligence, it's been both an important component and an outcome of the TMS solutions for a long time. In fact, if you were to look at MercuryGate, we've had extremely sophisticated and customizable reporting in the core system, even without the addition of the BI module. What it has changed dramatically over the years, and what's new with the addition of the module, is the ability to take that data analysis to a whole new level. First of all, there's a lot more access to data, but taking it to a sophistication where it brings in more important aspects of the data from different places, and building an understanding of how that different data is related, and then allowing the filtering and the ability to parse the data, and by doing so, answering very specific questions on the fly. Instead of having kind of common reports, you're able to on the fly ask it, what about the last 6 months, or what about only on truckload, or allows you very sophisticated ways of slicing and dicing.
Yeah, no, I've seen the same as well. I mean, I think you're right. We've kind of evolved, or I see the evolution is, there's always been reporting, right? And reporting was almost kind of looking at the past. In some ways, it was kind of static. Almost people just print out these reports to kind of look at. Or they kind of looked like, they were kind of a step up from Excel spreadsheets, right? So it was Excel, but in a browser form, right? And I think that provided some level of value. But I think you're right. I mean, what we're seeing now is, much more graphical user interfaces, much more flexibility, providing the end user, kind of giving them more power and more intuitive ways to slice and dice the information to get to those insights that ultimately are going to help them make smarter decisions.
Right.
So, so when you talk to your customers, I mean, what types of BI information are they, looking for, and then how does that then translate into business value?
So shippers really want to quantify cost, associated with shipping products by customer, by carrier, by lane, by route. With this kind of information, they can identify areas to reduce cost, and especially associated with specific carriers or serving specific customers. Do they have the right carriers covering the right loads is a question they'll often ask. Is there a better way to serve the account, or should they increase the charges that they're having for that particular customer or type of customer? They also wanted to do things like identify transportation trends and do so by mode, again, by customer, carrier. This information can really help shippers understand if their transportation costs to serve a new customer are increasing, are they staying the same? And, is it even consistent amongst the different customers, or are some, are there general trends, or are there some outliers, and what is the makeup of those outliers? I think, the greatest benefit is being able to use the data, not just for historical purposes, but to identify the areas of opportunity for improvement and to make informed decisions for the future. This is really how you plan to achieve continued cost savings through these types of tools, and not just account for what you saved in the past.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. I mean, I think a lot of times, a lot of the reporting historically was, okay, what happened last week, what happened last month, what happened last quarter, right? And it was kind of very reactive, kind of backward looking. I think where I see a lot of the users today is really more proactive and using this almost as a continuous improvement tool, to your point, where they're really looking at data on a more real-time basis and really challenging perhaps some of the assumptions that they might have, right? To say, hey, what if, or is this really true? Like, with regards to the mode or with regards to the customer, right? To try to, challenge some of the assumptions that they might have around cost, around service, as it relates to transportation, not being able to really answer those questions much more quickly. And then when I think where a lot of transportation professionals get excited is when they see something that they didn't expect. Either on the positive side, like, wow, I didn't realize that we were actually saving this much, or I didn't realize that, we were achieving these benefits, or that we were actually doing the right thing. And then obviously, from the negative side, to say, gosh, I always thought X, but in reality, when I look at the data, it's a really Y. And then, be able to peel back the onion and say, okay, we got to take some action here to kind of, move the trend in the right direction, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's important. A lot of people don't realize that, the data doesn't lie, and intuition doesn't necessarily equal what you see with the data. And I think that's a shock to a lot of people.
Right. I think the other key piece is, particularly now, I mean, I think as we're heading into, 2018, right, there's a lot of conversation, these days about there being a transportation perfect storm and the challenges ahead from a capacity standpoint and a rate standpoint. A lot of transportation professionals, and one of the things that we've been encouraging them to do is to have those conversations with upper management, right, in terms of what to expect in 2018 with regard to transportation, and the best way to kind of make your case in terms of why the budget needs to be X, or why you need more investment, why you even need a transportation management system, right, is to have data, right, to back up your argument or back up, your position. And I think that's another way that business intelligence can help transportation professionals, is to help communicate more effectively with upper management in terms of what's going on with transportation.
I agree. And even the reports are really, well sort of situated for that, they're easy to read. You can do drill downs and really draw a lot of complex kind of relationships graphically that I think, is the language that executives speak.
Right. And I think one of the things you see with solutions is the ability to create different types of views or dashboards, depending on whether you're a frontline user, right, that's more interested in the more detailed information versus, but creating an executive dashboard that will help, kind of upper level management kind of get a broader view of what's happening, right?
That's right.
So, we're kind of running short on time here, so I'm just going to go to, a couple of more questions here. I mean, so how do you see, BI for transportation management, evolving over the years ahead? I mean, what new capabilities or innovations are on the horizon?
So, I can mention the usual suspects in terms of future technologies. Of course, things like AI and Internet of Things are going to evolve. But I think one of the things to realize is that BI is going to evolve in itself as we continue to build out its foundation. I think, the more investigative research you do, the more insight you have to really expand it. I think, at Mercury Gate, we've really learned that organizations that outperform are really using data for competitive advantage. What sets them apart is their ability to get a few things right. First, drive business outcomes by applying more sophisticated analysis across more disparate data sources. So I think you're going to see that more in the future. And then capture the time of value and develop that speed of insight and speed of action as a core differentiator. The last and third one is, I would say, they look to change the game in terms of shift the status quo. It could be how they apply the data in their analytics to attract, grow, and retain customers, or manage the data in terms of transforming their financial process, optimize operations, and create new business models even. at their very core, either directly or indirectly seek to capitalize on the value of the information. And so when we look toward the future, I think it's really, the sky's the limit in terms of really the value that these systems can provide.
Yeah, no, I love that last point. I mean, I think, obviously from a technology standpoint, things like machine learning and artificial intelligence, I think are going to, play a role here in this whole area of BI and analytics. I mean, I'm not going to be surprised. One of my predictions from a few years ago is that we're going to see kind of the Alexa or the Siri as a user interface, right? For transportation management in general and other enterprise applications. But I can see, instead of having to, manually type in or go to menus or drill downs, is just speak to the computer and say, hey, show me, the costs over the past, 3 weeks, in this mode for this customer using this carrier type of thing, and then have that automatically pop up. So I see that. But I think the point you brought up, the second part of it, the non-technology piece, I think is equally powerful. And the fact of new ways to leverage the data. And I think a lot of times, the focus has been historically, and rightly so, and I think that's going to continue to be the case, in terms of how can we manage costs more effectively, how can we improve service and make sure that we're meeting our customer requirements. But I think those that are going to be leading the way are going to be the ones that, almost like what I spoke about at your user conference, how do you leverage logistics and transportation as a competitive weapon, and then be able to leverage data and look at data and BI from that lens, right? In terms of being able to look at the data, look at the information, convert it into insights that then will drive some action to help you, modify your processes or develop new services or things of that nature to help you be, use your transportation and logistics as a competitive weapon.
Oh, I totally agree. And in fact, I think, the more sophisticated you get in that, the more competitive advantage you'll have.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Karen, I mean, we're kind of short on time here now, so I'm going to go right to my last questions. I mean, as a way to wrap up, I mean, what questions should shippers and logistics service providers, ask themselves to assess whether, they're ahead of the curve or behind the curve when it comes to business intelligence and analytics in transportation?
So I think you can think about it in terms of maturity phases. So, the first question is, do you have the ability to measure accurate data? Second, do you have the systems in place to more than simply, allow tracking and tracing? Is it in spreadsheets? Are you, have it more automated than that? I'd say third, are you being served up insights to your data that you can effectively use? I think, insights are great, but if you can't use them, effectively, that's very limited. And then finally, do you have the ability to use this information now versus waiting months for a development cycle? I think, those really sort of frame, the sort of adage, do you have the data? Is it accurate? Are you being able to measure it and compute it, report it, and use it?
Yeah, no, I think, whenever it comes to technology, in particular, transportation management systems, my quick rule of thumb is, if you're still using spreadsheets, if you're still using whiteboards, if you're still using paper and downloading stuff and trying to do things manually, you're obviously behind the curve because, with the rate of change in technology today and the, new, more powerful capabilities that are out there, your competitors or other companies that are out there are able to, crank through a lot more data and be able to glean more insightful connections between the data and more, be able to see continuous improvement opportunities or opportunities to innovate than you will ever be, still using, the old way of doing things. So I think, the questions you asked, I think, relate to that as well. So Karen, like I always say at the end of all our episodes, we always just manage to scratch the surface on the topics that we talk about. But I think we hit some great high points, some great, food for thought and advice for companies out there in terms of, how to be thinking about business intelligence analytics, particularly in transportation management, and, some course for action for them to take or think about in the weeks and months ahead. So again, thank you for making the time to be with us today.
Thank you. I love your blog.
Great. Thank you. And I want to thank those of you that joined us. If you are watching this episode on demand, either at the Mercury Gate website or on Talking Logistics, and you've got a question or a comment for Karen, you can post it there, and I'm sure that she'll be more than happy to respond via that medium. Again, thank you all, and look forward to seeing you in a future episode of Talking Logistics. Have a great day.